This table belongs to guests who actually matter to this establishment. That was what Cordelia Staines said when she looked down at James Whitaker, a man in worn work boots and a faded flannel shirt sitting across from his 8-year-old daughter at the best table in the room. She didn't look at the reservation card. She didn't ask a single question. She just looked at his clothes and decided she already knew everything she needed to know. James Whitaker had arrived at Pinnacle 44, the rooftop restaurant crowning the Meridian Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago, 40 minutes before their reservation. He had dressed that morning the way he always dressed, dark flannel, clean jeans, the steel-toed work boots he'd owned for 6 years. His hands were calloused along the base of each finger from years spent on job sites before he ever sat behind a desk. He hadn't thought about the boots until he saw the woman at the host stand glance at them briefly before composing her smile. Tatum was wearing a cream-colored dress with small yellow flowers along the collar. She had chosen it herself 3 days earlier, holding it up in the department store with the careful seriousness of someone making an important decision. She was turning 9 in 4 days, but James had moved the celebration up because she had a school art showcase the following weekend, and he wanted the birthday dinner to have its own space, unhurried, undivided. The host had seated them in the northeast corner, the curved window section with a full view of the skyline and Lake Michigan catching the late afternoon light. Tatum pressed her palms flat against the glass and held her breath for a moment, studying the city below as if she were taking inventory of every building. James watched her and felt the particular kind of quiet happiness that doesn't announce itself. He ordered her a sparkling water with a cherry because she liked to feel like she was drinking something fancy. He reviewed the menu but mostly watched her sketch on the small notepad she carried everywhere. Spiral-bound, the cover decorated with stickers she'd collected since first grade. The pencil moved quickly. She was drawing the skyline from memory, not even looking out the window anymore. For a few minutes, the restaurant was peaceful. Soft jazz from somewhere, silverware against china, the low murmur of other conversations. Then Cordelia Staines walked in. She was wearing a structured ivory blazer, her hair swept up in the kind of style that took 45 minutes to look effortless. Her assistant, a young man in a navy suit, walked 2 steps behind her carrying an embossed portfolio. She moved through the restaurant with the certainty of someone who expected rooms to rearrange themselves around her. Several servers straightened slightly as she passed. She stopped when she reached the corner table. She looked first at James's boots, then at his flannel shirt, then at Tatum, who had stopped sketching and was looking back at her with the neutral curiosity that children wear before they understand that something uncomfortable is happening. Cordelia turned toward a man named Dex Portman, the floor manager, who appeared almost immediately at her shoulder. "I specifically requested the northeast corner when I called ahead," she said. Her voice was pleasant, controlled, and final in the way that certain people train their voices to be when they want to avoid seeming unreasonable while remaining completely unyielding. "I don't see why that request wasn't honored." Dex looked at the table. He looked at James's reservation card, which clearly showed the northeast corner, confirmed 3 weeks prior, guaranteed with a credit card deposit. He looked at Cordelia's assistant, who quietly slid a business card toward him. Cordelia Staines, managing partner, Staines Capital Group. "One moment," Dex said. He came to the table and spoke quietly to James. There had been, he explained with the tone of someone who knows they are lying but is committed to it anyway, a scheduling overlap. The northeast corner had been reserved for a long-standing private client. The misunderstanding was entirely the restaurant's fault. They would, of course, be moved to a lovely table near the center of the room, complimentary appetizers, his sincerest apologies. James looked at him. "I have a confirmed reservation for this table. I have the printed confirmation." "I understand, sir, and I apologize." "I put down a deposit," James said, not loudly. He kept his voice level, the same voice he used on job sites when he needed to redirect something without escalating it. "My daughter and I have been seated here for 20 minutes. Dex of his voice. "I'll make sure the new table is." "The new table isn't the issue." James set down his menu. "She's turning 9 years old. I told her 2 weeks ago that we'd have dinner at the window table and watch the city lights come on. That's what I promised her." Tatum looked up from her notepad. She was paying attention now. Dex glanced at Cordelia, who was standing with arms folded at a careful distance, performing patience. "I understand this is disappointing," Dex said, his voice dropping further. "But the client in question is a significant partner of this property, and—" "She doesn't have a reservation for this table," James said. Dex said nothing. You know she doesn't, James said. You're looking at my confirmation right now. Cordelia stepped closer, apparently deciding the quiet approach had run its course. I don't mean to intrude, she said, which meant she was about to intrude, but I've been hosting business dinners at this property for 6 years. My company's events account alone has contributed. Well, it would be impolite to say the number. I think management understands the value of maintaining relationships with their core clientele. She looked at James with an expression that wasn't hostile but was something worse. Evaluative, as though she were doing mental arithmetic and he kept coming up short. And I'm sure, she added, that a family dinner would be just as lovely at one of the center tables. Children usually find the busier parts of restaurants more entertaining anyway. Tatum understood enough to know she had just been explained away. She set down her pencil. James looked at Cordelia for a long moment, then he looked at Tatum. Tatum's jaw had tightened slightly, that particular expression she got when she was working very hard not to show something on her face. She was looking down at her notepad. The skyline drawing sat unfinished. We'll stay, James said to Dex. His voice was quiet and completely certain. I purchased this table. The reservation is documented. If there's a dispute about process, I'm willing to wait while it's resolved through whatever channel is appropriate. But I'm not moving my daughter to a different table because someone prefers ours. Dex's expression moved through several things: discomfort, calculation, resignation, and then settled into a kind of apologetic blankness that indicated he had made his decision and regretted it before he'd even finished making it. He told James that the restaurant reserved the right to adjust seating arrangements in cases of operational necessity. He said it like a man reading from a card he hadn't written. A server appeared at James's elbow and suggested he follow her to the new table. James didn't move. Dex leaned down and said more quietly that security could be involved if he preferred, but that he hoped it wouldn't come to that, given the circumstances, given that there was a child present. James studied him, then slowly he stood. He held out his hand to Tatum. She took it without speaking. Cordelia's assistant began unpacking the portfolio. Cordelia accepted a menu. She glanced once toward James and Tatum as they moved away, then looked out the window at the skyline with the satisfaction of someone who had closed the negotiation. James and Tatum were placed at a table near the kitchen corridor. Not the back corner, but close enough that they could hear the swing of the kitchen doors every few minutes. A candle in a glass, paper menus instead of leather. Tatum sat across from him and stared at the tablecloth and said nothing. James watched her face. He knew all of Tatum's silences. This one wasn't sadness exactly. It was the particular confusion of a child who has been told without words that the rules she thought applied to everyone do not, in fact, apply equally. Dad, she said finally, still looking at the table, did we do something wrong? She asked it the way children ask questions they already half know the answer to, hoping to be corrected. James looked at her. He thought carefully about what to say and what to leave out. He thought about Dex's face when he'd made his decision, and about the assistant's business card sliding across the host stand, and about Cordelia looking at his boots like they were evidence. No, he said. We paid for a reservation and we showed up for it. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. Tatum looked up. Then why did they move us? Because someone decided we looked like people who would accept it. He paused, and they were testing whether that was true. She thought about this for a while. Should you have told them something? About. She stopped. She knew things about her father that she didn't fully understand yet. She knew that he wore old boots on purpose and drove a 10-year-old truck, even though she'd seen the paperwork on the kitchen table once, numbers with too many zeros to mean anything to her. She knew that people at her school sometimes treated her differently after they found out, and that her father had talked to her about why they shouldn't. Why didn't you just tell them, she asked. James reached across the table and straightened the small glass candle holder so it sat centered between them. Because if I have to tell them who I am before they treat us with basic decency, he said, then they were never really treating us with decency. They were just treating a title. Tatum looked at the candle. Outside, the city was beginning to soften into evening light. That's not fair, she said. No, he agreed, it isn't. He picked up the paper menu, but here's what I want you to notice. Every time someone does something like this, they put something in writing, or they approve something, or someone nearby is paying attention. He looked at her over the top of the menu. The world keeps records. People like that forget that. Tatum turned to a fresh page in her notepad and began drawing the candle. James reached into his jacket pocket, looked at his phone, and typed 4 sentences into a message thread. Then he put the phone away, ordered Tatum's birthday dessert in advance so it would arrive with a candle, and looked out the narrow window at the lake turning gold in the distance. He said nothing else about it. He asked Tatum about the art showcase, about which pieces she planned to submit, about whether she still wanted to try watercolor next. She talked about her teacher and about a boy in her class who knocked her favorite pencil case off her desk and hadn't apologized, and about a cloud she'd seen that morning shaped like a dog wearing a hat. The kitchen doors swung. The city lights came on, one section at a time. 42 minutes later, a woman in a gray blazer walked into Pinnacle 44 with the focused attention of someone who arrived places already knowing what she was looking for. Her name was Harriet Bloom, and she was the Regional Director of Guest Experience for Meridian Hospitality Group, the parent company that owned 6 properties across the Midwest, including the Meridian Grand. She had been scheduled for a quarterly operations review at a different property that evening. The meeting had been rescheduled 3 days earlier, and Harriet had rerouted her Thursday accordingly. She had also, 43 minutes ago, received a message. She had read it twice. Then she had called the number back and listened carefully, and then she had gotten in a car. She walked past the host stand, past the bar, past the northeast corner, where a woman in an ivory blazer was mid-sentence to her assistant, and she stopped at the table near the kitchen corridor. She looked at James Whitaker, at the flannel shirt and the worn boots and the folded paper menu and the little girl with the notepad drawing a candle, and the expression on her face changed in the way that happens when professional composure briefly loses the argument with genuine feeling. "Mr. Whitaker," she said. James looked up. "Harriet." She looked at Tatum's drawing. She looked at the paper menu. She looked at the table next to the kitchen. "When did you arrive?" she said, though she already knew most of it from the message. "About an hour ago," James said. "We had the northeast corner, the one with the window." He said it simply, without resentment. "We were moved." Harriet turned and looked across the restaurant. Dex Portman had noticed her arrival and was standing at the edge of the bar area with the stillness of a man trying to calculate how much trouble he was in. Harriet didn't raise her voice. She was not the kind of person who needed to. She walked to Dex and spoke to him for 2 minutes. His face went through the familiar sequence: discomfort, calculation, and then a gray resignation. He pointed once toward the northeast corner. Harriet turned and looked at Cordelia, who had noticed by now that something was happening but had not yet understood what. Harriet came back to James's table and crouched slightly so she was closer to Tatum's eye level. "Happy almost birthday," she said. Tatum looked at her seriously. "It's in 4 days." "I know." Harriet straightened. "Mr. Whitaker, I'd like to address this properly. Can I ask you a few questions about what happened this evening?" James nodded. She took out a small cloth-covered notebook, the kind that indicated she took notes by hand because she meant to keep them, and she asked him to walk her through the evening from arrival. He did plainly, without dramatizing any of it. He mentioned the reservation number. He mentioned Dex's explanation about operational necessity. He mentioned the phrase Cordelia had used, that management understood the value of core clientele. He mentioned the server who had come to his elbow and referenced security. Harriet wrote steadily. Then she asked Tatum if it was all right to ask her one question. Tatum said yes. Harriet asked what she had been drawing when the woman came to the table. Tatum showed her the notepad, the unfinished skyline. The city stopped mid-sketch. Harriet looked at it for a moment. Then she thanked her, closed her notebook, and crossed the restaurant to the northeast corner table. Cordelia looked up with the expression of someone who had survived several social inconveniences this evening and expected to survive this one as well. "Miss Staines," Harriet said, "I'm Harriet Bloom, Regional Director for Meridian Hospitality. I need to ask you to gather your things. This table was reserved and occupied by a confirmed guest when you requested it. The reservation wasn't in error. The guest was moved at the direction of restaurant staff based on your request." Cordelia set down her wine glass. "I've been a preferred client of this property for—" "I know your account history," Harriet said. "That's not relevant to what happened here." She paused. "A father and his daughter came for a birthday dinner. They had a documented reservation for this specific table. They were displaced because staff chose to prioritize your preferences over a binding reservation. That's not how we operate, and I'd like to correct it." Cordelia's assistant had gone very still. "Are you seriously asking me to give up my seat?" Cordelia said slowly. "Based on the complaint of someone who—" She glanced toward James's table without completing the sentence. "Based on the reservation system and the events of the past hour, yes," Harriet said, "I am." Cordelia looked around the restaurant. Several nearby tables had gone quiet. A server near the window was studying the floor. "I'll be contacting the general manager," Cordelia said. "Please do," Harriet said. "I'd also encourage you to contact our corporate guest relations team. All of tonight's records will be preserved." She stepped back slightly. "Someone will assist you to another table." Cordelia rose. She had the practiced composure of someone accustomed to winning rooms through presence alone. But presence requires an audience that has already decided who to believe. That calculation had shifted. She walked away from the window table without looking toward James or Tatum. When Harriet returned to James, she asked whether he and Tatum would like to go back to the northeast corner. James said yes. They gathered their things. The notepad, the pencil, the sparkling water with the cherry Tatum had been carefully carrying in both hands. A server helped them move. James picked up the candle from the corridor table and brought it along, and no one said anything about it. When Tatum pressed her palms against the glass again and looked out at the city, darker now, more fully lit, the lake black and reflective below, she exhaled slowly, the way someone breathes out when they've been holding it without realizing. Harriet spent the next hour working through the evening's records. She pulled Dex Portman's reservation management log. She could see the timestamp of James's original booking. 3 weeks prior, northeast corner, deposit paid. She could see the timestamp of Cordelia's same-day call. She could see the timestamp of Dex's reclassification of James's table, marked in the system as a voluntary guest accommodation, the restaurant's internal phrase for a guest agreeing to relocate. No agreement had been recorded. No guest signature, no written notes. She called Dex in and asked him directly whether James had indicated willingness to move. Dex said James had complied eventually. Harriet asked whether compliance under the suggestion of security constituted voluntary agreement. Dex looked at the table. She asked whether he had reviewed the reservation before reclassifying it. He said he had relied on the host's summary. She asked whether he had verified what table Cordelia had actually been assigned before agreeing to displace a confirmed booking. Dex did not answer. Then she asked the server who had escorted James and Tatum to the corridor table to come in. Her name was Yara Chen, 23 years old, 6 months at the property. She sat across from Harriet and held her hands flat on her knees. Harriet asked if Yara had been present when James's original reservation was checked at the host's stand. Yara said yes. Harriet asked if the reservation had clearly shown the northeast corner. Yara said yes. Harriet asked why Yara hadn't said anything when the table was reclassified. Yara was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had seen Dex's expression when he looked at the business card, and she had understood that the decision had already been made, and she was 6 months into a job she needed. She paused, then she added, "But I took a picture of the reservation screen before Dex changed it. I didn't know exactly why. I just didn't think it was right." She unlocked her phone and showed the screenshot. Time-stamped, clearly showing James's name assigned to the northeast corner, Cordelia's name assigned to a different table entirely. Harriet looked at it carefully. She asked Yara to send it to the operations email. Yara did. "You understood this was wrong," Harriet said. Yara nodded. "Why didn't you say so in the moment?" Yara thought about it honestly. "Because I didn't think I was allowed to." Harriet made a note. Then she thanked her and told her that the record she had preserved was the most important piece of documentation from the entire evening. When Harriet returned to the dining floor, she brought the reservation timeline, the reclassification entry, and Yara's screenshot. She showed them to James without framing or commentary. He looked at the records without surprise. He had known what the truth was. He had simply been waiting for someone with the authority to read it alongside him. Harriet told him that Dex Portman was being placed on administrative review, pending a full investigation. She told him the reclassification would be reversed in the system and that all records would be preserved without alteration. She also mentioned quietly that when she had received his message and called back, she had recognized his number from a board contact file. James said that wasn't why he had called. She said she knew. She said the reason he had called was the part she wanted to discuss. He had written 4 sentences. He had described what happened. He had not mentioned his position. He had signed it with his first name only. She asked whether he wanted to be involved in how the investigation proceeded. He said he wanted 2 things. First, the reservation policy reviewed, specifically the clause that allowed management to reclassify a confirmed booking without written guest consent. Second, the staff handbook revised to include a clear prohibition on displacing any guest from a confirmed reservation based on the preferences of another guest, regardless of that guest's account history or financial relationship with the property. He said it like someone who had thought carefully about what needed to change, rather than what he was personally owed. Harriet wrote it down. Then he mentioned Yara, her full name, the screenshot, the fact that she had documented the truth at real personal risk. He asked that her personnel record reflect what she had done, and that she be given every opportunity for advancement the property offered. Harriet said she would handle it personally. The birthday dessert arrived while they were still talking, a slice of layered chocolate cake with a single candle and a small card the server had written by hand in careful letters, "Happy birthday, Tatum." The kitchen had added a second fork, though no one had asked them to. Tatum blew out the candle on the first try, which she announced was scientifically significant and extremely good luck. James smiled and did not correct her. When Harriet left, she paused beside the table and told Tatum that she had seen the drawing from earlier, the unfinished skyline from the corridor table, and that it was very good. Tatum considered this. "I didn't get to finish it from the other table," she said. "The light was different there." "Finish it from here," Harriet said. "The light will be better anyway." After Harriet left, after the plates were cleared and the candle had burned down, and Tatum had filled 3 more pages with skyline and lake and the particular orange of city lights hitting the water, James asked for the check. When it arrived, he reviewed it and then flagged their server and asked a quiet question. He had noticed 2 tables away, a woman eating alone with a young boy who was pressed against her shoulder, with the careful stillness of a child who was ill or very tired. She was cutting his food into small pieces and watching his face with the particular vigilance of apparent tracking symptoms. She had been nursing the same glass of water for 40 minutes, and she had declined the dessert menu without looking at it. James said something to the server, who nodded and walked away. The woman 2 tables over looked confused when her check arrived, showing a 0 balance and a handwritten note that read only, "Happy to share a good evening." She looked around the restaurant. No one met her eyes. James folded his receipt into his jacket pocket and helped Tatum gather her things. "Dad," Tatum said as they waited for the elevator. She was holding her notepad against her chest. "Yeah. That thing you said about the world keeping records." She thought about it. Yara kept a record. She did. Tatum looked at the elevator doors. "Is that why you didn't say anything? Because you knew someone would?" James considered the question the way he always did when she asked the ones that mattered. "I said something," he said. "Every time Dex said something that wasn't true, I said what was true. I didn't need anyone to believe me in the moment." He looked at the descending floor numbers above the doors. "I just needed to make sure the moment was documented." The elevator opened. Tatum stepped in and turned to face the lobby below, watching it rise to meet them as they descended. "The woman in the white blazer," she said she thought she won. She thought she did, James agreed. But she left before the dessert came. He looked at her. She was watching the lobby with the same focused attention she gave skylines she was planning to draw. "Yeah," he said. "She did." The doors opened and they walked out into the hotel lobby, where the marble floors reflected the light, and a pianist in the corner was playing something James didn't recognize, but Tatum immediately began humming along to, as though she'd heard it somewhere before, as though she already knew exactly how it ended. Outside, the city held all its lights up against the dark, and James Whitaker walked beside his daughter through it in his old boots and his flannel shirt, in no particular hurry at all.